We're good.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the first session of the day. This is Procurement, Personal Liability, and Possibly a Perfect Solution. They'll be presented this morning by Phil Jocumson, who we shall note is not a lawyer. Go for it, Phil.
All right, thanks. Yeah, so again, I am not a lawyer, but uh, I've been here on campus for over 20 years. Started back in December of 2004. So I've seen a few things with this. And I'm also not a procurement agent, so this is not exactly my space, but it's what I've run into, and again, some of this information I think is pretty useful. And as you can tell from the title, I attempted to try to use words that start with the letter P. I missed a few, but my name starts with P. I'm Phil, DevOps engineer in Do It. I work with the shared web hosting team, and I've worked with the Wisco team and software and load testing team, a couple other teams in the past. So I will move on. Cool. So the first thing we're going to do is start off with a poll for you folks. And I believe we've got 4 questions that should be popping up for everybody.
I think I launched it.
I see it. Yeah. Awesome.
Great.
Give folks some time if they want to click through that. Cool. So we passed. Oh, we passed 66%. Awesome.
All right. It looks like we have 11 of 11 respondents. I'm going to close it.
All right.
And do you want me to share the results?
Yeah, if you could.
Okay. Um,
Cool. So hopefully that shows up for everybody. And again, the whole point of this is we're talking a bit about, how as a university employee, how does the university actually go get stuff? The click-through agreements are one of the more interesting ones again that I've run into. It's it's the type of an agreement that we are least likely to have full in-depth RFP process on, et cetera, right? This other phrase about signature authority, we'll talk about that in a second. And again, if you're not familiar with what that is, that's fine. That's part of the point of this. And then just in general, looking for some information about how familiar folks are with procurement authority. Kind of, it looks like a pretty good spread there across some people who are pretty new at it and some people that are definitely more familiar. So thank you for that information. That definitely helps inform what I'm going to talk about next. So there's a memo that the business services has out there about the signature authority. And again, I think, right, requires an official university signature to be valid. The actual title of the document in question is not important. So you can think of terms of service, terms and conditions, um, end user license agreement, any of those kinds of phrases like this. This is one of the types of things. Um, I'm going to. There's going to be again these reference links at the end of the thing. So when we share the slides, you can definitely go back and dig into that a little bit more. This specific wording kind of got me because there are things like when I signed up for Google Analytics for one of our websites, it is a like I hit OK, I hit yes. There's even some obviously some packages on Linux and stuff where I need to agree to something that some kind of a license in order for that. The reason why this matters, we'll get to here, is that if something bad happens related to that software and you didn't have signature authority, you get to be personally legally liable as well as personally financially liable. And if that sounds a little bit scary, it's because it is, and it's exactly how the state procurement process works, right? If someone did not have the authority, so they exceeded the authority given to them in their job role, uh, then it's on you. The Some interesting stuff there, right? So some more background about procurement at the UW. These are just again some of the things off the top of my head that I know about it. There's a lot of things that we end up getting that are kind of low dollar amount things. So maybe I've got a $15 a month subscription to something piece of software that helps out my department. That might be something that ends up on a pro card. There are definitely like different tiers of things, right? There's, as you can imagine, there's less scrutiny at smaller dollar amounts, so things like under $5,000 per year. There are things that are under 50,000 is a different thing. I believe, like for example, uh, Do It Do It's purchasing department is has signature authority for some IT contracts that are under $50,000, and we can take care of that. Things that are more than that, then it has to go to campus purchasing, and then there's these other ones too. Sole supplier, simplified bid. You've probably seen some of these before. RFP, so request for proposal, request for information, stuff like that. Those happen with again some of our bigger contracts. Sole supplier, I think, is a very interesting one. I remember that even like our box contract a number of years ago had surpassed $50,000, and there are other pieces of software out there that are air quote web file system or web file storage things, and so in order to get that thing renewed, they had to go all the way to the governor in order for them to sign off on like, yes, this is actually the one that we need. This is the one that matches our use cases. We've got specific reasons why we need this. Um, when we have a contract that we're interacting with a third party on, there's a few of these clauses that the state, so we have these rules at the state level that get handed to us, and then we add some additional interpretation to it here at the UW. So there's again a lot of layers. Venue is I think, is the easiest one I can get people to wrap their head around. If you can imagine a startup in Silicon Valley, which is located in California, they're not inclined to agree to this one about venue, and we're required to have all of our contracts be able to that we can sue the company if something goes terribly wrong in the state of Wisconsin. That we're not, flying our state of Wisconsin lawyers to California, to Belgium, to wherever, right? So that's one of the ones. It's the easiest one I can get people to wrap their head around because not every company that we get software from is located in Wisconsin or incorporated in Wisconsin. This other one about indemnity and hold harmless. Those clauses have to be removed. That's the requirement. And again, the idea is that we can't reduce the liability of the other party. Binding arbitration is another one too. Like that's incredibly common. I think in practice it seems to me like it's one of the things that would be in a contract in order to try to uh, reduce, like, oh, do we actually have to go to court? Well, arbitration is something that happens outside of court, outside of a lawsuit. So these are a couple of them, and if you look through any of those click-through agreements, there's almost always going to be a venue that probably isn't Wisconsin. There probably is some kind of indemnity or hold harmless clause, and there probably is some kind of, in a lot of cases, some binding arbitration. So all of those are things that either have to be modified or removed in order to really meet the needs. Um, so go on to this next thing here. Uh, so all of those things, it's like what is risk, right? This idea of it's something could happen. There could be a loss. There's something that would some event transpires where like if I had a car, some of the risk for my car is going to be that I get in an accident or that some part of it breaks and needs to be repaired, etc. A premium for insurance is just it's like getting used car insurance, right? I pay a certain amount per month I'm going to say a small amount per month in order to have insurance coverage for a much larger amount, right? So I do a small amount, but if the car gets totaled, I can have the whole thing covered. Self-insured is what the state is for a lot of contracts. And self-insured means that you just take on all of the burden. Now, the most complete way to think about that is that if you have a $100,000 risk and you are self-insured for that risk, you have $100,000 in the bank to cover it. And that is a lot different than like getting $100,000 of insurance for a house, for example, does not require you to pay $100,000, right? Um, let's see. Okay, so competency controls, it's again a way that we might be able to address some of the risk involved with something without actually changing or removing the risk. And then I did some research on this about umbrella policies because this whole personal liability thing kind of got to me, and I'm like, all right, well, as an individual, can I do something like can I get insurance against the possible risk from me clicking through agreements at work? And the short answer is no. there aren't any insurance companies that are going to let me buy insurance for a thing for actions I took as an employee while I was on the job. And that one also got me because it's like I would just do that because then I wouldn't have to worry less about the whole click-through agreements, etc. And let's go on to solutions. So the the easiest one for, hey, I need this piece of software, and we can't get them to modify the contract. We can't get them to remove the clauses that we need to have removed as required by the state of Wisconsin. No is the easiest answer. However, trying to get, and I love this phrasing, explaining the price of yes. What would it take in order for us to be able to say yes to this piece of software or yes to this installation? Um, and again, modification contracts, we'll get that in a sec. That's part of it, or it could be part of it. Um, but it really means that you need to get like on the other side of the table with the person asking for it and really find out what are they actually trying to do, right? If I guess I'll say to use the example of video conferencing software, we have a bunch of different video conferencing softwares on campus. Each of them you can do video with other people, right? But there are definitely differences in there that might be substantial, right? There may be like capacity limits is a good example. Not all of them can do, 2,000 people at a time. Some of them are definitely meant for some more smaller group engagement. You need to find out why the person is asking for this piece of software. So and this really helps them then also like understand, all right, is there one feature of this software that I asked for that isn't on an approved list already or that we can't get the contract modified that is incredibly important, or like maybe I have some alternatives, right? And that's obviously the next thing. If we've got an approved piece of software that meets nearly all of the needs, that's kind of our next best thing, right? Um, did UW-Madison system, the state, et cetera, or even these other memberships we have, did they already have a piece of approved software? And there's a whole bunch of things that we have like this where like UW system goes out and gets approval for a certain type of software, and we can basically just piggyback on that. And that's awesome because it really shortcuts the timeline on what we have to do. Someone else has actually like done all of the hard work for us. Same thing for the state of Wisconsin has lists of approved contracts and approved vendors, and not having to vet a vendor from scratch is a huge time saver. Um, okay, you might be thinking about this. What about $0 or open source software? And so I'm just going to read these out loud and kind of think through this. If I said open office, document editing, right? So not I have a hard time trying to wrap my head around what kind of it's not a very risky thing, right? If I use open office instead of Microsoft Office, am I putting the university at a huge risk for anything? And it's hard to come up with those things. Linux kernel is kind of in the same boat with that too, right? Like if I use the Linux kernel versus Windows machine, is that actual underlying OS like is one of them actually introducing considerably more risk than the other? Just as far as the software and not talking about 0 days and that kind of thing. But as I keep going here, right? So Flipper Zero, if it's free, great, but what is it used for, right? There's an interesting risk profile that starts arising out of that one, right? That it could be used for bad things. Kali Linux, same deal, right? It's a Linux distribution that includes a whole bunch of penetration testing software in it, all of which are open source as well. And if you install that and start scanning servers at the university, um, personally, you've got there's some pretty big risk going on there too, right? And again, just my usual disclaimer with this stuff. If you do something like you want to use that to try to find out what parts of your software are vulnerable, you as an individual need to go get something in writing from someone who can approve and understand what you're trying to get done. You don't want to be having a conversation with cybersecurity about, oh, I just downloaded this thing because it was interesting, because that really doesn't look good. And then I think OpenClaw is a great example of something else too, right? I can download that, I can start using it, and there's a whole bunch of people who don't understand the risks that that software could expose you, or in the case of the university too. Um, so things to think about that. Just because it's free or $0 doesn't mean there's zero risk. It doesn't mean that's not a contract when you click through it. Um, things to keep in mind. this is where we usually end up. If this is a big enough and most important, important enough piece of software, asking for those terms and conditions changes is really important. There are definitely some organizations that are going to be willing to work with you. Again, if it's zero or free, they're not highly likely to spend money on having their lawyers look at something. Uh, the good news is if you start that though, you start that conversation, be like, all right, well, your $0 tier, maybe folks don't have any lawyer time available to do some of these contract modifications. What kind of a buy-in would we need to have? Like what kind of a contract would we need to have in order for that to be a possibility? Um, and sometimes it's more reasonable than you think. So this is part of the just ask and see what you can find out. The number four there, that last one about the contract compliance commitment letter, or again, Do It calls it a departmental assumption of risk letter. This is kind of like the next one that we run into quite often. Give you examples of stuff like uh, certain WordPress plugins. In order to get them, it requires payments as well as again a click-through agreement of some sort. And it's not something where it needs to get run up to the CIO, but some part of the department along the way there needs to actually um, agree to the terms and conditions and to take on the liability of if something does go sideways. So that's something we'll run into with again some low cost low dollar software. That's pretty common. So if you weren't aware of what that is, like you can ask your procurement agents about that. And part of having that letter in place is that it calls out like exactly which clauses are the ones that would have been problematic, right? So is it, oh, it's a venue thing, and maybe they also have a like an binding arbitration clause, for example. So that it details what it is, and probably a little bit of a description about like why does your department think that's not a huge risk, right? If it's something like I have to, do something as an add-on for open office, again, it's about document editing. That's a very different thing than if I was trying to, I don't even know, if I was trying to use a piece of software in a restricted data environment, for example, same deal. You'd want to have a lot more certainty um, about what's going on with those things.
Hey, Phil, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We
Yep.
are a little bit past time if you have a kind of wrap-up statement you'd like to make on this.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking we had until 9:30, so that was the other.
Oh, my thing says 15 minutes.
Yeah, I think that is what it got
But
listed as.
Jason, the rest of the sessions in this time slot are 30 minutes. So if everyone is okay and Phil would like to continue, we have time prior, like this won't interfere with the next round of sessions.
if everybody's good with
Please,
that,
please continue.
All right. And it's almost done here anyway. So this last one, this is the kicker. Um, Commercial software resellers are kind of our magic pill for like solving this issue because they can buy insurance, right? As a commercial entity, they can buy insurance for contract liability. Um, they can also just figure out what price that they would want to charge us. And again, if they buy insurance or not, that's up to them. If they think it's a good bet and that the liability itself is low enough, just that little bit of profit margin, which can be pretty low, a couple percentage points, for example, might be sufficient. Again, I got this AWS example, I think is a pretty decent one, which is like, why don't we buy AWS directly from AWS? And as usual, the answer is they didn't want to modify the contract, right? That's one of the reasons. They didn't want to change venue. They didn't, they're not going to remove, some of those clauses about indemnification. But resellers are very happy to take a couple percentage points on what is probably an incredibly large contract for the University of Wisconsin. Um, and again, we can sue them. And like part of what they agree to then is that we can sue the state of Wisconsin. We can remove the indemnity clause like we need to. And there's sort of again some of this about like we end up with situations where like the bulk discount is possibly one of the options. So the thing that I will say is a new area is if anybody is interested in trying to find out if we can get resellers to sell us $0 software, but take on the contractual liability problem, right? If it normally was a free piece of software, but you can charge me $1 a month to have access to that software and have all of the contract stuff taken care of, that would be a massive bargain for us. And honestly, it's just straight up free money for them at that point, with at least with a pretty low risk profile. So keep this in mind. The existing contracts that we've got through again system through the state already through other educational institutions. Those are all great places to take a look at stuff. Uh, and if not, try to see what you've got for resellers. So, and I am somehow just finding the chat now. So if that is actually pretty much all I had. So I was actually close, Jason. I didn't realize how many slides were left.
Yeah. Sorry, Phil. It's the internal struggle of honoring the published schedule versus knowing we've got the
Oh,
time.
yep, no, I know. Yep. That's good. Um, in terms of resellers. Right, yeah. So different, yeah, exactly. Right, right. Yep. So Chris and Sean are having a conversation in the chat there about some of the percent markups. Um, yeah, and check some resellers will like there's more than one way to possibly get AWS. Obviously, we've got one right now, but every reseller might have a little bit different thing. Cool. That's what I've got, unless other folks have additional questions. As usual, like I said, there's with the slides, there's going to be some of these links out to documents and vendor lists and all that kind of stuff. That's neat. That was it. Thanks, folks.
All right. Well, thank you, Phil. If anybody has follow-up questions for Phil later on, you can find his contact information on the IT Pro Conf webpage. Enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thank you, folks.